Today's guest is someone I've had the privilege of knowing for years. And honestly, someone I'd call one of the most inspiring people in my life. We met working together, and although we worked in very different departments, and you'd think we'd be clashing heads every now and again, we were actually pretty much aligned on what actually mattered in the business and for the customers. And since then, we've been catching up on growth, mental health, and self development. And at one point, I even brought Danny on as a coach for the company I was working with. So I've watched this man's journey up close, and I couldn't be more proud to witness his journey. My guest today is Danny Rahim, an award winning mindset and performance coach and the founder of Elevate Human Performance. Danny, welcome to Grow with the Flow. I'm so glad that we finally got to do this.
Thank you, Flo. Yeah, a wonderful intro. I'm very grateful for that. And as we were just discussing pre-starting the show, seeing both of our journeys and our growth, from stepping off from senior or managers in corporate careers, stepping off to pursue purpose and passion and what was meaningful to us, and seeing your journey leaving, a very well-paid career into something that served you better is also very inspirational, and I'm sure will appeal to a lot of this audience, the Grow the Flow audience, but a wider audience as well. So equally as proud of you and your journey.
Yeah, I feel like one thing that I've definitely learned on this journey is how much more fun it is to do with like minded people and friends along the way, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. There's always something to learn. You can never be too proud or have too much ego in the way. And we've certainly shared a lot of our learnings and thinkings and ruminations over the years. And hopefully, well, it's nice to see, first of all, look at us. We're in the UK, it's 1:15 p.m. and we have the luxury and the freedom to have a podcast and have a conversation together and record it, whilst 10 years ago, we would have both been in, or beyond that, whenever it was, we would have both been in Malta, in the office, doing our work, contending to business or tending to business requirements. And now look, we get to have a nice chat and hopefully serve our community and our networks with some nourishing and informative content.
Although the offices in Malta were pretty fantastic, I feel like there's worse places to be than those offices, right?
Our offices were pretty cool. Yeah. I'm actually going going back to Malta in a couple of weeks, so I'm thinking maybe I swing a little visit.
Well, do say hi to anyone that might still be there.
Yeah.
That we know. But you just mentioned it, our joint journey in corporate just a few years ago. And I think that's a good opportunity to maybe just share your own growth story. I mean, your corporate background obviously is something that has impacted you a lot as well, but well, I know that was actually just a small part of your growth journey. So why don't you talk me through your growth journey? See how did we get here?
How did we get here? Yeah, great question. How did we get here? So going back as far as I guess it's relevant, and Flo, you're very familiar with my story, so anything that is useful, please feel free to. I'm very open. I've always been very open and transparent with my journey, so there's nothing that I'm not comfortable in speaking about. But initially, it goes back to a story of a young man with a mum who became very sick with her mental health. She had a car accident. She unfortunately lost her baby as a result of this accident. And mental health, or mental ill health, was thrust onto the family quite unexpectedly. I had two younger sisters who were not old enough or equipped to be able to support mum. And being the eldest brother or eldest son, I was that responsibility fell on my shoulders. And at the time, I realized that I didn't really understand what mental health was or mental ill health was. It wasn't really a term discussed in our family. So going alongside this was this world of wanting to express myself, but not really knowing how. And through support from my school, I ended up pursuing drama and acting, which led me to auditioning for some drama schools and then going off to the Manchester School of Theatre and studying acting for 3 years. So during that time, it was really nice to get out of London, to be away from the chaos I didn't really understand. I remember initially the teachers just thought I was being a bit lazy or not really committing to the course. It wasn't that. It was I was getting calls from ambulances and police and having to try and look after my sisters and, you know, at all sorts of times in the night, and then going to university or school the next day and having to just almost pretend like everything was normal. And that wasn't because people didn't ask me. It was because I wanted to keep what was going on in London and my schooling in Manchester separate. I didn't want it to blend over. I wanted to have it clean and to be able to focus on my studies. But eventually I had to share it with people, and those people, friends and university lecturers, were very supportive. So the acting took off. I left drama school. I was very fortunate. I landed a really good agent, then landed a job in some theatre, ended up doing that show in the US, being nominated for an Olivier Award, then stepping off, doing some TV, more TV, then landing a part in a bigger TV show, which we filmed in 6 months in Canada. So the acting career was flying, and I was probably one of the most successful actors of our year, if not the 3 years of drama school at that time. But what was going on behind the scenes is none of that experience with mum had really been processed. I still didn't really know what mental ill health was, and I was just doing, you know, what I could to support her, whether it's sending money, whether it's that emotional support on the phone. Very uneducated, but very willing to support mum in her journey. So 2008, I graduate. 2009, my dad very unexpectedly passes away. Again, that didn't help mum in her journey. She, although I wasn't particularly close with my father at the time, it was obviously a huge impact for mum. So now we've got dad passed away, we've got mum really ill, I'm on this TV show, I start to feel very guilty, I'm starting to think to myself I should be back home supporting mum, and so I just make that decision to go back and support mum through this period. She was in a very, very bad place mentally, lots of diagnosis, lots of time with psychiatrists and hospital, and actually police. She was arrested on numerous occasions. And to frame this, my mum is like one of the quietest, calmest, you know, softest individuals. But when this mental illness takes over her, she became or becomes a completely different character. So I had to juggle that and really learn how to be compassionate and empathic and know that it's not actually mum who's saying and doing these things, it's her mental illness, and we just need to go in and manage this and support her. So we're going through all of this, and in 2012 I myself have a complete mental breakdown. I guess the pressures of everything that had come before, not processing it, and then breaking up with my partner at the time, just being really, really lost actually, and it led me to a real place of low mental health. There was, you know, I was experiencing a lot of suicidal ideation. I was in a really bad place, and I knew I had to get out of this place. So a friend of mine said to me, "Why don't you come and join this recruitment company that I work at? You know, you need to have focus, you need to have some routine in your life, and that structure might help you rather than being on a TV show for 6 months. You know, you get paid really well. I've bought an apartment, all of the things that you think that you want, the luxuries, deep down I wasn't happy within. And actually all the money and all the things that I'd acquired were not bringing me joy or happiness. And so I knew an adjustment had to occur. I started this recruitment company. Within the first year, I become one of the top performers. But it was very kind of Wolf of Wall Street. And although, again, I was performing well and it was very material, you know, you hit a good deal month, everyone gets taken out to Savile Row to get tailor-made suits and watches and all of that kind of jazz. But it wasn't really me. And what was nice for me to know is that I could really work hard and put my mind to something and become the best at it. That is what I took from that journey. And so I asked for a sign, a way or something to get me out of this place. And I said, the first opportunity that comes, I'm gonna leave the recruitment company. And lo and behold, my agent calls. It's the first time I've ever had a straight offer. Usually you have to go and audition for TV. And this, it just came, and it was a show called Death in Paradise. The irony of that never fades on me. And they said, look, they've offered you this part. You need to fly out to Guadeloupe on next Sunday. Can you do it? Or next Saturday, can you do it? And I said, absolutely. So handed in my notice, took some holiday leave, and I was off. And I was in Guadeloupe, and I was sitting there with a script in front of me after having the mental breakdown, looking at the scripts, looking at this beautiful scenic view of water and the mountains. And I was like, this is the time for the change. So I did that show, sort of got myself back on my feet, realized that creativity was still a passion for me, but realized I hadn't really done all the processing of all the stuff with mum. Acting, TV work was just keeping me on this distraction mode, because money was coming in and everyone's saying to me, Danny, you're absolutely smashing it. And that is what I then thought to myself, okay, everything's fine. You've got nothing to complain about, Danny. There's people in the world that are starving. There's people that are experiencing war and homelessness. Like, what on earth are you complaining about, Danny? So just get on with it. But then in order to support my mum, I knew I had to learn and study. And that's where the work came in terms of, coaching, therapy, lots of studies, doing a master's in psychology. So getting the academic background behind it, I was getting asked to go and do a lot of talks explaining my situation of myself and my mum, and how best to support her and life as a carer. And I was getting asked lots of questions at the end of these talks, and I thought, I don't want to be giving guidance for others on my experience. Although I can share honestly what my experience was, every person's experience with mental ill health or as a carer is very subjective, and I don't want to be misguiding people. That's why I took the study. And within that time as well, we had our time in Malta. I'm trying to think what year or years that was. Again, an opportunity presented itself. I think it was the back of the recruitment, actually. When I came back from Death in Paradise, I think that's where we ended up in Malta. And it was a role for me that was utilizing a lot of my skills, being a people person and being quite data driven and project managing and pulling things together. So it played on my strengths, but ultimately the values or the vision of what that role was to end up doing, or what it was trying to do, its purpose or its vision as a company, was not aligned to where I wanted to go. And so fate took its course, was able to step away from that, and Danny Rahim Coaching was formed. And over the last 10 years, that's allowed me to do a lot of work with individuals, with organizations. I worked all across the globe with 6 or 7 different Fortune 500 companies, working with startups, supporting my give back became supporting young people in their initiatives and mental health challenges. So where it's rounded off now, last year I had a very big contract with a very well-known company. It was a six-figure salary, and I was, again, the money was coming in, but I didn't feel entirely fulfilled. I was going in and delivering a lot of burnout training, even though I had been asked to go in as a positive psychologist, an applied positive psychologist. But the way the US works is a very different beast to the UK and Europe, and their employment laws are very different. And a lot of individuals in the US are very, very overworked. And so I was going in, supporting these individuals, delivering big talks to 500 people, 700 people, and giving them all these tools and techniques. But then if that evening or the next day, the organization drops even more work on them and then starts to talk about redundancies, those things, it's very hard to implement well-being strategies if the culture and the climate around you does not support that as well. It's like two conflicting worlds. You're trying to look at the individual well-being, but the system or the infrastructure is not allowing that nurturing, that recharge, and that well-being. So again, stepped away from that one last year, and then thought, you know what? With all of this knowledge and experience that I have, and all the courses that I've built and spent, 12 to 18 months building these programs, evidence-based programs on burnout, resilience, there's got to be an easier way to be direct to market, so I don't have to always have an intermediary, i.e. the organization. And so I built the Elevate Human Performance app, which I guess is business to consumer. And, I can write and create whatever I want within that only serves the individual, is only there to support the individual, rather than a bias to what the organization wants me to say or wants me to position it in a particular way. I have absolute freedom and autonomy. And that allows for better content that really gets individuals challenging. Where am I at the moment? Where do I want to be? How do I get there? What's important to me? What are my values? What is my mission? What is my purpose? All the stuff that we've discussed over the years. And I feel much happier in that space because no one is my sponsor. I create, as this podcast, you are creating it with your own agenda for the people that you want to support with this. And that brings me great joy. So I guess, that covers a lot of information that brings us here, but
that goes a full circle. Yeah, I think for me,
Yeah.
even just listening to the story again, and of course, I've heard the story before. I think what's really impressive to see and to hear again is there's been kind of this constant stepping in and out of purpose, right? This topic of purpose is kind of consistently appearing and reappearing in your life. And even if there's moments when you feel like there's an opportunity to have a more purposeful job or opportunity to work and to share your story, again, it feels like it's very easy to kind of feel a misalignment, when you stepped into the US, for example, etc. So it's interesting to see that even as you're actively stepping into this life of purpose and meaning, the challenge and the journey never ends, right?
Yeah, completely. It's an iterative process. And what I'm realizing, even in just speaking to you now, is, money will always be presented, and it's something we all have to consider. If you've got family, you've got mortgage, you've got things to pay. And when someone drops, a very decent compensation on you, it can throw you a little bit. And sometimes you go, oh, do I want to pursue my vision, my values, and my purpose and meaning? But I've got the kids in school. I mean, I don't have children, but I've heard this a lot, and I completely empathize with it. I've got 2 kids in private school, and they're doing this, and I've got this to pay for, and I've got the car, and I've got the house. It's very easy for me to sit here with no real dependencies and say, look, pursue a life of meaning and purpose. But what I do know is that when people do that and they commit mind, body, and spirit into that, the money comes back later on, but in different ways that you might not have expected it. But you've got to be brave to step off, as you were in that first instance, and leave a 6-figure career and all the security and stability, but ultimately in your soul not being happy. So you're a prime example of that. And what I realized 10 years into this is your earning potential, when you really care about what you're doing, is like 10 times more than it could be.
And your performance potential, right? Because what I noticed is working any job that you don't really feel aligned with. For me, I noticed I have an internal clock of 12 months, apparently. I can do a job and find something about that job, find something about the role that I can learn, that I can grow into, that I can understand. But after 12 months, I realized, okay, this isn't enough. What's next? What's new? And for years, I would change the role, right? Within the company where we worked, it was pretty much once every 12 months when I shifted and changed my role from either into a new department or then heading the department, setting it up from scratch, or eventually climbing up to managing a team with it. But it always needed to change. I felt like my performance wasn't sustainable because I wasn't really utilizing my full potential. And something that you're describing now, what I really kind of hear is how the definition of success is kind of consistently changing within that, right? Because at first, the definition of success is maybe a lot more linear and one-dimensional in terms of, the higher the salary, the more successful you are. You had in your recruitment business looking at the watches and the tailored suits and everything. And obviously now that I'm in Hoi An, here in Vietnam, tailored suits are, this is where you want to go for tailored suits in Asia. It's a
Yeah.
much better price than what you would have paid in London back then.
Yeah, completely.
But this is exactly it. I've had those exact same thoughts around how do I define success, right? Money is such a big driver and in many ways a motivator for many people. And you're right, you can't go about it unless you want to go completely out of society and just live in a jungle and farm your own vegetables.
Yeah. And I've been very blessed in with the work that I do. I've coached individuals who earn 10 times what I earn as a coach. And I've been able to have this education throughout this 10 years of the coaching business of realizing money really doesn't bring you happiness. And I've coached CEOs of multi-million pound companies. I was working with a chap, he was 24 years old and sold a company for over $50 million. Money didn't buy him happiness. And by having those life lessons and working with those individuals, I am able to see at what point joy comes back and meaning comes back into individuals' lives, and then the subsequent performance after that. And that's been I feel very grateful for that, because even though I am coaching and supporting all of these individuals to the best of my ability, I'm also learning from them as well, right? I'm also seeing at what point, what made you super successful, when everything came in and you had all the money and you had all the financial abundance that you thought would make you happy, and then you weren't. Why was that? What was it that was not clicking for you? So in seeing all of that, it allows me continuously to recalibrate, and every day or every week say to myself, what am I doing this week? Why am I doing it? I'm doing that because I really care about it, or I'm doing that because I really care about the people that I'm supporting. And to be clear and to be transparent, I allocate 20% of the business now to giving back to charitable endeavors, right? So I'll go to a school and I'll speak at a school for free. I actually went last week and went to my old university and spoke to all my graduates. It was that was a half day I spent with them. Didn't charge for that. So it's not always about money. And the more I've realized that element of service and support, things come back to you. You never give to receive. I don't give things. I don't do this thinking to myself I want any value from it. I do it as a support mechanism for you and the listeners and the viewers. But you never know, in 6 months time, a year's time, someone might watch this and think, oh, that's a really interesting concept, or you know what, I'd love to get that guy in to come and speak here. And it's happened to me 20, 30, 40 times. Giving to literally support and serve, and what comes.
One thing that is so incredible to me is how you've been dealing with so much adversity in your life. There's been such a traumatic experience for your mum that is obviously going to have an incredible impact on her family. Losing a child in the aftermath of a car accident, raising 3 children, whilst dealing with ill mental health, and eventually losing your husband. I can't begin to imagine how that would feel like, right? So obviously understanding the impact that this has had on you and the consequent struggle that it left you in, but just seeing how you bounced out of this and how you're, not only cope today, but also how you've able to turn this around, makes me wonder, when did this adversity shift from something that happened to you to something that shaped you? Surely there was a moment, a point in time. What was it that shifted this for you?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think there have been numerous moments, and the moments that I remember have involved a lot of pain and suffering. Actually, you know, crying and being alone and being depressed and just basically saying enough is enough. I'm not. I've got a choice where my life goes here, and we all have a choice. No matter what extent your mental ill health is, realizing that we have autonomy and we have agency, the ability to change a decision. Are we going to take the left path today or the right path today? Are we going to eat that food today? Are we going to be kind to people, or are we going to be frustrated? All of these things, we have choices, and those choices are what define us. And there's a quote around that. It just popped in my mind, but I can't remember who said it. But it's who we are in the challenging moments that matters the most. The person that we become in the challenging moments is what matters the most, not when things are good. And I made that decision. And so there were a time when I was living at mum's and she was shouting and screaming and trying to kick down my door. And I remember like thinking, I don't want my life to be like this. And so I joined the cadets and to help get some structure and some discipline. And that was when I was like 13 or 14. So there have been numerous iterations and numerous moments in organizations where I've decided that I want to live more authentically and more aligned with my values. I've left a couple of organizations, a couple of very high paying jobs for that. Then being a coach and deciding, look, am I sticking to be a coach with the money because there's a world that exists where I can earn a fortune, but it be a bit of a box ticking exercise in the level of support I give people, and knowing that I'm helping them, but I'm only helping them 20% of what they're able to be helped, because really if I was coaching them individually, I'd be saying to them, you need to leave that organization, but I can't because of the constraints of that. So it felt like there's something around integrity. And the most recent adjustment for me, where this adversity moved to advantage, I guess, was saying, hey, I've got this wealth of experience now. My mum has experienced this, and my family has experienced this. I can sit and cry about it for the next forever, or I can use it as something valuable that can help and enable other people that are in those positions. And so I asked my mum, we had quite a lengthy conversation. I said, Mum, you've had one heck of an experience, and I have as well, as your son, and the girls have as my sisters and your daughters. Like, what if I could speak to an audience or a group of people that might be in a similar position that I was as a carer, or whatever the circumstance is, and encourage and inspire them? Would you be okay with me sharing our story? And she was like, absolutely. Like, that could just be one good thing that could come out of everything that we've endured and everything that we've experienced. And it was perfect. And so every time, we've been nominated for some awards recently, and every time I get to go back and share that with Mum, it's like everything we went through and experienced it had some meaning attached to it. It was foresight. We had to go through that to be able to talk about this. For me to be on this podcast with you, I've had to have a level of experience to even exist on here, which then is going to resonate with how many other people through whatever impact and reach this podcast has. So it's a framing thing.
This part of the journey is so impressive, right? Because it's something that you might be able to remind yourself that whatever you're going through will make you stronger. It's those moments that shape you when things are incredibly tough. As you said, this is when you have an opportunity to really, show who you are, and these will be the moments that shape you and really allow you that growth. The only issue is that doesn't help you when you're in it. When you're in the thick of it, even though you might be going through this journey and you might have this experience already, and you know that this will down the line turn you into someone who's now able to help people, but sometimes when you're going through it, it just sucks. But how have things been with your mom now? Like, how has the mental health of your mom has shifted over the years since you've gained all of these, just filled up your toolkit and all of your skills, and how have things changed for your mom?
Yeah, it's a good question. I want to just you something that you were saying just then about it's really tough when you're in it. I wanted to share something from a friend that I'm experiencing with him at the moment. So a dear friend of mine. Before I answer that question, I've known him since growing up, and he's recently gone through a breakup, a separation with someone that he loved dearly. He's 3 or 4 months into that breakup, and he was or is very lost in that process. Everything, it's all consuming for him at the moment, and he's had low mood and many other things that we've been working through together. However, the reason I bring it up, because we've just done a video testimonial together, and it was so inspiring to see him, and he's just hit 100 days alcohol free, or he had at the time of recording, right? So he just said one of the factors that contributed to that separation was my alcohol use or misuse, right? And that's publicly acknowledged, so I'm not sharing or divulging anything that's personal to him. And although he is still a little bit lost and dealing with and grieving the loss of that relationship, he has just hit 100 days of sobriety. That is such an incredible feat for him, something he's not achieved in 35 plus years of existence. Well, obviously he wasn't drinking as a baby, but yeah, he won't see that now because he's in it, and his focus is on the breakup and the loss and the grief and all the feelings that he's experiencing. However, I know that this 100 plus days of sobriety is helping his mental, his physical, his emotional, and in 6 months' time, if he keeps this up, like, that is going to be one of the biggest and greatest transformations of his life. And it came from a traumatic event. It came from adversity, because if it hadn't come from that, he wouldn't have stopped. So, it just really lends itself to exactly what we were talking about. It's not even me saying, hey, adversity to advantage. I could list 10 people around me, including someone that I spoke to last week who's just achieved this amazing feat. And when you transfer it from lack, loss, grieving, mourning, and you go, hold on a second, I'm transforming into someone new, someone better, someone wiser, someone kinder, whatever those things are that he's aspiring to be, then all of that becomes worth something. So that's just it came across, and I thought it was important to say, and also to share for him, because I'm super proud of him, and I sometimes I give him a bit of a tough time, but I'm super proud of him and what he's achieved, and I know that his life is going to be better as a result of this. You just can't sometimes see it when you're in it, right? So to then answer your question about mum and how is she now, so mum will have a diagnosis till she dies. She's the most recent diagnosis is emotionally unstable personality disorder. She also has physical ailments from the car accident, which means she's on a constant morphine patch. But what we've learned and we've realized as a family is two things that I hope will be valuable for the audience. Number one, mental ill health is not an on-off switch. It's like you don't just eat a nice meal and it's gone, particularly at that level of complexity that long-standing mental health illness or disorders. But what we have learned as a family is that mechanisms of support, that triangle of support. So previously it was, if it's mum was at the center and it was me as her only support, right? There's a lot of pressure on me. And if I become unwell for whatever reason, or I can't be there at the hospital, then I start to feel those things of guilt, shame, should have been there, this is my fault, what kind of son am I? But what I do now is my sisters are a lot older. So it's me and my two sisters. So there's a triangle of support around mum. Okay, so we all take a role. I deal with all the clinicians. I have more of a kind of financial support. One of my sisters lives with mum, so that's more home care and home support, making sure that there's good food in the house and that the house is tidy and that she's supported. And then I have my other sister, Sky, who has her own daughter, so her own family and responsibilities, but she's got the car, she lives close to mum, so any hospital visits, any transport, any, I guess, more logistical aspects, Sky covers. So by having that support of people, we are all supported in our support for mum. So I support the girls and I support mum, but it's a lot less pressure in that way. And so mum now is in a much better place. Again, the mental illness is not as switched on and switched off, but where she'd be having episodes maybe monthly, she might have one every 6 months, maybe one every 8 months now. So when that happens, I'll generally get a call. It might be from her, it might be from the hospital saying, your mum's had an episode, she's in hospital now, we've sectioned her, or she's come in voluntarily, and she'll stay in for a month or 6 weeks to recalibrate medication or whatever it is that needs to be sorted. And we go and we pay regular visits, and we support her there. We take her what she needs. We show that love, that kindness, that support. We build on what's strong, so we don't say, oh, you know, mum, you know, you've let us down. We say, mum, you're doing great, and you know, if this is just one slip that you've had this year, that's perfectly allowed. You have a long-standing condition, and that loving and that nurturing and that support yields far better results than scolding or blaming or shaming or finger pointing. And so that's what we've learned to focus on, making sure that triangle of support is there, and that our support comes in a loving and a kind and a nourishing way. And some people might say, well, what about if that person is really mean to you? Like, believe me, like, my mum has on paper been awful to me. She had me arrested. It's messed up my US visa. She didn't mean to. I hadn't been arrested before, and she got me arrested, which messed up all my US visa work. So every bit of work that I do in the US now I have to get a special visa. You know, the things that she has done that I could be mad at her about. There's lists. There's I could write a book on it, but I choose not to focus on that because I know it's not her fault. I know that this wasn't who she was before she went into this space of mental illness, and I know that in her heart she's a kind person. So again, that notion of forgiveness and kindness and release allows me to be free of it also.
But how do you cope with this in your family? Because obviously a diagnosis like this and a journey like this that you know will just follow your family for as long as your mom is alive. But how do you deal with this? Because you know that it's, well, on one hand, you can accept that that's just a journey. And of course, you know, you have this triangle where you support your mum. But how is this on your family? How do you cope with it together?
You said the word there yourself. It's acceptance. You know, there's something. I'm not particularly religious or godly, but there's something called the Serenity Prayer, and within it says, "Accept the things that we cannot change." You know, that's one of the lines in it. So accept the things that you cannot change. I cannot. It's something that is beyond my control. So I have to work with it, and we have to work with it, and that gives you a lot of peace, rather than, you know, complaining or worrying about the injustice of it. You know, there is this notion of, you know, there's always someone else worse off than you, and it used to be a bit of a mantra for me. Danny, don't complain, there's always someone else that's worse. Okay, your mum's unwell, but you've got food on the table. Okay, your mum's unwell, but you've got a roof over your head. You know, I used to have this way, and I'm conscious I don't push that on anyone, because everybody's experience is completely different. But I think in society we spend a lot more time focusing on what we don't have rather than what we do have. And if we spent more time focusing on what we do have and the gratitude for that, we would be happier in ourselves, and therefore that what we were able to convey in our support for ourselves and others.
Don't you think, though, that mantra might sometimes invalidate our own experience? Because I personally struggle a lot with this at times when I looked at my own experience and tried to remind myself there's other people in the world that are far worse than I was. You know, when I went through a period of leaving my job and feeling quite lost and realized how I felt lonely and without a clear sense of purpose and identity in my life. And it struggled. I struggled with it so much that I felt like I felt depressed for a while there. And I had a very hard time accepting that, because I would tell myself, well, there's other people that are that are worse off. So I would tell myself like, okay, don't be complaining so much about it and just kind of move on, because you have, a privilege here that you need to take advantage of. So inadvertently, I would suddenly start putting pressure on me as well.
Yeah, and it's a really good point. All of our subjective experiences are completely valid. What I would say be careful of is you understand where it's come from, you validate it, you accept it. It's okay to feel like this, it's normal to feel like this. There are many other people that might feel like this. But when that lingers on for 12, 24 months, it's not productive, and it becomes negative rumination. And that's what I say people should be conscious of. Those beware of the ants is what the saying is, automatic negative thoughts that self-labeling, it makes it your excuse for why you don't do anything or why you don't engage in anything. You may well have depression, you may have anxiety, you may have any of these things, and you should acknowledge those and get the appropriate support that you require. But I also know from working with over 100 clients, when you sort of self-label and self-identify as that, and that becomes your only definition of yourself, it's debilitating. It's not productive. It's not productive to label yourself like that for endless times. It takes away your motivation. It takes away your drive, and puts you into this what's known as learned helplessness. So you just learn to be like, oh, I can't change the world. This is what it is for me. I'm just going to give up. I'm just going to leave it. And a lot of people suffer with that.
I feel like we just brushed past this, and I think I want to focus on that. Like, you talk about ants, automatic negative thoughts. Tell me more about this concept.
So how we, I saw this video the other day, actually. It was similar to this, but I think it was Bruce Lee, and he's talking about, be careful of how you speak to yourself and about yourself, because words are powerful. They cast spells. That's why it's called spelling. Yeah?
Yeah.
And if someone says to you, Flo, do you think you could run to that tree and back in 20 seconds? You go, no way. No way, there's no way I could do that. Or automatic negative thought. You haven't thought about it, you haven't tried it. There's a caveat to that when people are being modest and people are being humble, because that's a good trait, to be modest and humble and to not brag. But if your immediate response is, oh, I could never do that. Could you do 10 push-ups? No way, no chance. You're priming your brain already to tell itself, I can't do that. Whereas actually, how do athletes that achieve world records achieve and break world records? They don't sit there before that. We just had the guy complete the marathon in under 2 hours, the first person. You think he was sitting there before saying, I can't do that?
Yeah.
You think he was going before, there's no way I'm going to do that? Maybe he wasn't even thinking about that. He just had a pace that he wanted to set. But how you prime yourself and how you speak to yourself has a huge impact on whether you will achieve that or you don't. And so this idea of ants, beware of ants, automatic negative thoughts. The next time someone says to you, can you do something? You say, I'll certainly give it a try. Or something that is a more positive response to it. I'd definitely be up for giving it a try, rather than saying, oh, no way I could do that. There's no way I could do that. Could you do it?
So it sounds like if my first reaction is a negative one, then it's almost like it becomes an indicator that I need to change something. if I find myself in these positions, be like, I can't do this, and like, I don't, and I recognize those a lot. Going through this journey, right? Stepping out in many ways, like starting all over again, right? After you've had the success again, in quotes, career in corporate. These ideas of like, oh, I don't know if I have what it takes to start a podcast. I don't know if, so I had to recognize exactly that. I never put a construct around it. So when you mentioned it, the ants now, all I know is ants from like here in Southeast Asia. I have them all over my yoga mat and
they're there as a reminder for you, bro. They're there as a reminder every single day.
Yeah,
to be mindful
certainly
of
will
them,
be.
But if you frame your day with I can, I will, I am, it's a lot stronger than I won't, I can't, I shouldn't. And that's the first part of the cognitive process is positive priming. It's saying, yeah, I absolutely can do that.
I feel like this is an incredible segue now to to a journey that you recently stepped on, where those positive thoughts and this positive priming would have probably come in very useful, because you just alluded to it as part of your friend's journey, who reached 100-day sobriety, and kudos to him. But you have a little milestone yourself there, right? You've just completed 30 days of sobriety, 1 month sober, and
Thank you.
congratulations.
Thank you.
Take me take me back to day one. What was the moment that you decided this was the year?
So I would not, and this is interesting because I was talking with some friends about this at dinner yesterday, and my drinking habit was, or habits were not that I would sit at home and have a beer by my. In fact, I've never drunk by myself. I would always drink socially with friends. It's a nice summer's day. Let's go and have a beer. Let's go and have an Aperol spritz, whatever. And so I never really thought of it as a problem. But what I did realize and acknowledge for myself is that when I would go out and I would have it's a Saturday, it's a sunny day, and I meet my friends and it's 12 o'clock in the afternoon and we sit down and we have an Aperol spritz and we're out and then we have some lunch and then we have a glass of wine, whatever. I can actually label myself as now, the problem that I have with drinking was I was a binge drinker, which means I would have 1, 2, 3 drinks and then I'm on the rocket ship going to God knows where, right? Now, what I've learned, having recently been diagnosed with ADHD, last year I was formally diagnosed with ADHD, I'm learning a lot about ADHD and alcohol, and how that dopamine deficit, actually by having that drink, it puts your baseline at neutral, right? So you're actually just feeling now how everybody else is feeling normally, but the alcohol is making you feel that. So in order to keep that going, the binge drinking that's associated with that is, oh, I want to keep feeling normal. So you drink, but obviously alcohol is then having an impact on your body. I've only learnt this in the past year. And so I said to myself, I coach so many people, and a few of those people I have coached through their sobriety journeys. And I had this moment of thinking, right, in terms of being more congruent and authentic and helping people to be the best versions of themselves and achieve whatever they want to achieve, it feels incongruent for me to be coaching and taking someone on a sobriety journey. I even took one of my clients to an AA meeting. They were nervous about going. I said, look, let's go together. We'll go to a meeting together. It was amazing. And I met some wonderful people there and learnt a lot. But it doesn't feel aligned for me to be coaching, supporting, sit at an AA meeting and then go out on a Saturday night and be drinking excessively. And it also really doesn't align with my work that I'm doing with sports people and looking at peak performance and cognitive function. So I said, why don't I practice what I preach? Why don't I know all the lessons? I know all the theory behind it. Why don't I actually apply this for myself and actually even more so demonstrate that the model and the framework that I've built around this, it actually works? So I knew I wanted to undertake it. My father also passed away. One of the reasons was from alcohol misuse. He had a particularly weak liver and he went into a coma and his liver wasn't able to support him through that. So I had all these reasons. I had my why. Why do I want to do it? And then the question was, when am I going to do it? And it was coming up to my 40th birthday. And I thought, what a perfect gift. How often in our lives has our body and our mind supported us through some of the most challenging events or experiences? And what do we do to reward it? We go and drink. We have a glass of champagne. We essentially poison our body as a way of saying thank you to it. And one day it just penny dropped and I was like, this is so counterintuitive. But it's what we've grown and to know as the norm. So yeah, I decided for my 40th birthday, I would be the last time I'd be drinking for at least a year, put my method and my theory into practice, with all the beautiful lessons that have already come as a result of this now 34 days of sobriety. And yeah, I'm learning so much, I'm growing so much, and I'm really questioning if I would ever even go back to alcohol again. And as I'm going further into the research and the depth of understanding, you know, alcoholism, addiction, its prevalence in society, the impact that it has, you know, I wrote some stats down here actually, and I'll just share one with you because this is super interesting, right? So in a multi-criteria analysis, alcohol is ranked as the most harmful drug overall that exists. And that is, it's not above heroin and crack cocaine in terms of what it does to the individual, but when we talk about impact it has on other people, so the alcohol affects me, but it also affects the people around me, it's the most harmful drug that exists on this earth. And that's, people don't know that. People don't think that because it's so ingrained in society, you know, from the Prohibition era, it's been so normalized that alcohol, you just go out and you have a drink. Like if it were to be reclassified now, it would be a Class A drug. If we think of what it does in terms of morbidity, harm to society, harm to the individual, addiction, how that then impacts violence, not to mention what it does to you on a physiological level, physiological and mental. It's wild that it's still just allowed, and it's just something that we can go and buy from our local newsagent or supermarket.
It's insane, right? I mean, understanding how alcohol is not only impacting your body, mm-hmm. how it's affecting your sleep, but how it's affecting your mind, your relationships, and everything beyond it, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
completely.
For me, I think I've been sober for nearly 3 years now.
Mm-hmm.
My motivation was, I was starting to dance, actually. I was learning to dance, and I just realized at the end of the dance class, when usually people would now, you know, have a drink before we would go into the social part of the night. You know, as a German, we're not born with the rhythm in our hips, so it took me a minute to kind of get comfortable with my body. Exactly. So my thought was often like, I can't be drinking here. It's hard enough for me to remember the steps, so I need to be sober as I'm moving my body, right? And then eventually I just realized how I didn't need the alcohol. I remember this one conversation with a friend of mine. We went for a walk, and at some point it started raining, and we were like, oh, let's just go upstairs and have a tea, or, you know, have a chat there on the terrace. And I go into the kitchen, and, you know, as I usually would do, I take a bottle of wine, I open it and said, oh, you want a glass of wine? And she said, no, I don't drink. And I remember my reaction being, what do you mean you don't drink? And she said, well, I stopped drinking a while ago. And I remember looking at her, and honestly, the one thing I'm really shocked about is my reaction, looking back, how I didn't understand the concept that people just don't drink, because it's been so normalized to have a quick drink, you know, like you said it yourself on your journey now of sobriety, on your daily videos of it, how, you know, something happens, something positive or something negative, and your reaction often would be like, call up a friend and be like, oh, let's have a drink, you know. I think this is potentially a whole conversation in on its own, how, especially for men, in order for us to open up and talk about feelings, emotions, struggles, you might need alcohol as like a social
lubricant,
right? A lubricant to enable that.
Yeah.
But yeah, my reaction that I felt like she doesn't want a drink was insane, because it's been so normalized. And I think something that I noticed, and you briefly mentioned it earlier, you mentioned how growth often means that you have to let go of things, right? We talked about it. Sometimes that meant jobs or salary, security, but sometimes it means friendships and environments. And I think this alcohol journey was something where that happened for me. Looking back, I now realize that there's many people in my life that I don't see so often any longer because, well, if they want to go out, they just don't call me any longer, you know? That like, oh, hey, Flo, we're going to go to the pub. You want to join us? When the drinking or the night out or the parties are just like not something that, you know, that I would enjoy much any longer. Like, how has that been for you, you know, with that journey? Has there been a moment in your journey where, you know, it meant drawing a line under anything or anyone significant?
Yeah, it definitely. And I was thinking about it in the shower this morning. The people, places, and things that you frequent do change in this journey. And what it has really brought to light is some of my friends' whole social identity is around alcohol. They don't quite know who they are without it. Johan Hari has written in this book, Lost Connections. He attributes basically all of like depression down to not having high quality connections. And my question then becomes, what are our high quality connections? The guys down the pub that the whole interaction is based on who's getting the next round in. You're enabling each other to drink, quite often to binge drink in excess. And that's very different to going and sitting and having a small glass of wine with dinner. I think the French are very good with that. You know, they can have a glass and leave a bottle, but I don't think I've ever been out with my British friends, English friends, and left a bottle or left some. It's always gone and then some. And so when I now am receiving messages from certain friends, there have been friends actually that have messaged me and said, "Hey, do you fancy going for do you fancy going for a beer?" And I say, "Hey, I'm not drinking at the moment." And they go, "Oh, why? What's up? Is everything okay?" And I go, "Actually, everything's more than fine," you know.
Right.
But I had a beautiful message, and I've thought about doing a post on this. Maybe today or tomorrow I'll do it. But it's a friend in Malta. I mentioned that I'm going back out there. And I said, "Mate, I'm popping over. I've got some work to do over there. I'd love to see you for a little catch up." He said, "Yeah, brilliant." He said, "Actually, I might be at work, but if I'm working, I now own a pub over there. So if I'm working, you can come to my pub." And I said, "Brilliant. And just to let you know, I'm not drinking anymore." And he said, "Wonderful. Well, I'll make some chai tea then, and we can drink that." And it was just so normal and so accepted. And it's like, that's the people that you want to keep in your sphere, you know.
Absolutely.
Someone that just it's not even a blink, it's not even a heads. Why not? Is everything? They go, "Great news, sounds fab. I'll make us something else delicious to drink at a pub," you know. And I really appreciate that.
Don't you think that sometimes what I noticed, all of us have our vices, right? And what I noticed is, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this, sometimes our social circle is supporting us in enabling those vices, right? It's drug abuse, alcohol, etc. Because I notice sometimes it feels good to do bad together, if you know what I mean. Because we all
Mischief.
know that alcohol isn't good for us, right? We all know it. We don't need to be academics to understand how alcohol impacts us because, well, we feel it the next morning when we wake up. And I sometimes wonder if you go with your friends on a night out and you suffer together, you know, I mean, how many of us have carried a hangover like a trophy into the office when we like, "Oh, I'm feeling so rough today. I was out until 5 a.m." And it's something that we carry like a trophy because it makes us appear like we're a good time, you know. We can stay out and still be responsible or whatever. But when then one person decides to stop drinking, suddenly I think the other person would now be like, "Oof, but you stopping makes me now feel like
Look
I'm
worse.
not,"
Yeah.
it makes me look worse, right? So
Yeah.
how much tension is there, right? In our, and what does that say about our relationships, right? That's what I've often wondered, like how strong are our connections and relationship to these people that we've known often our whole life, right? Where we go out together, we go on benders together, and we feel like we're so connected because we have all these crazy stories to talk about on a night out and how we got drunk here and all that. But then the moment someone is stepping away from this, suddenly you feel like how that connection and that relationship isn't able to survive that, because the reality is that your sobriety is actually now putting a finger on someone who's not able to stop smoking, stop drinking, stop abusing.
Yeah, look, there's various schools of thought on this, but one of them is you are the sum of the 5 people that you keep closest to you. And so if everyone around you is drinking and doing loads of drugs and lying and cheating and not living honest and integrous lives, you're more likely to perceive that as the norm and probably most likely to undertake that behavior. So I have not written specifically to friends and says, hey, you're out of the core 5, but I'm very conscious of who are my core 5 and who is in that inner circle. And sometimes it doesn't need saying, but if someone or something is not serving you, then get rid of it. Why keep that excess baggage tied to you?
Also comes back to this level of agency that you mentioned earlier, right? You can't
Yeah.
just do that. You can't just cut out people from your life or invite people into your life. You can just walk up to someone and be like, listen, I love how you conduct yourself. Can we just like hang out? I want to just like
Yeah.
have a chat. I'll take you out on a coffee. Just surround yourself more with people that inspire you.
Yeah, and also some people might then say, well, what about if you can't choose? What if it's your husband? What if it's your mum? What if it's your partner that you live with, whatever? You've still got a voice. You've still got an ability to speak, your truth and actually just say, let me give an example. If you're living with someone that drinks a lot and you've built up a routine that, for 2, 3 years, 4 years, or the length of your marriage, you would drink every night, right? But you've decided to make a little bit of a change in your life to be healthier. It's not about judging that person. It's saying, hey, I read this article, or I listened to this podcast, or I watched this podcast today and it talked about, performance being improved by up to 75% when alcohol is not in the body for 2 weeks. And you go, I'm really interested in that. So for the next couple of weeks, I'm just going to try it as a little journey for myself. You do you, and that's no problem. And if that person then goes, whoa, I'm feeling a bit weird now. What, am I just going to sit and drink by myself? Is it just going to... That's their problem. That's not a you issue. That's a them problem, and something that they need to look at and address for themselves, because there's a reason that they're drinking. There's a reason that they're in that habit, and perhaps a reason why they can't break it. And that's not on you.
Oof. I mean, that realization, that learning, right? Because in any relationship, I learned that there's 3 paths that you have to acknowledge and recognize, right? There's your own journey, there's your partner's journey, and then there's your joint
Collective.
journey and life
Yeah.
collective together. Exactly. But you have to realize that there's certain responsibilities that you have to own up to. Don't expect your partner to fix you, right? You've got to do it yourself. And similarly, you can't, take on responsibility to make someone else's lives better. Of course, we want to support each other, but as you said, we always have a voice and we always have a choice. Of course, we can say like, well, but what if it's our husband, our partner? Well, the choice, of course, becomes a lot more difficult if you look at a long relationship. I mean, I hope that we just don't walk away from something just because it became more difficult. We want to work on it, but how is the very important way. But it's hard to imagine that, and obviously maybe this is a more pessimistic outlook on it, but eventually, like, where does the point come where we have to say, I can only walk this path so long? When do we have to take a step away from a relationship when we feel like, oh, we can't give up on it?
Well, first of all, it's a question of, like you said, it's the framing. Is it a challenge or an opportunity for us? That's the first thing. Do we see this as an opportunity for collective growth, or do we see it as a challenge that we must overcome? That's immediately your ants there, right? How are you seeing this? If you have 2 people that say they love each other and they've been together a long time, they've got kids together, actually we do some research which is not biased in any direction. We say, let's both look at this holistically together. Let's look at some stats. Let's look at what the highlights of your year have been, what the highlights of my year have been, what the collective highlights and the disappointments have. What have we noticed as a common thread? Make it an educational learning opportunity. If someone is completely closed to it, and says that you do you, but I'm doing my own journey, that's okay as well. Like, we forget that when you're in a relationship or a marriage for 20, 30, 40 years, you grow so significantly. Like, you're not the same human being at 20 that you are when you're 40, and you're not the same human being when you're 60. But now we've got this man-made concept of marriage binding us, sometimes in unhealthy situations and relationships that aren't good for us. Not always, but sometimes. And so, as you grow, it's important for us to identify and understand, does the person that I'm growing with, do they have a fixed or a growth mindset? Is this person interested in their personal growth and becoming a better version of themselves or not? And if it's fixed, look, I've done things the last 40 years in a particular way and I like how things work, then there's an alignment question, and that is another question and challenge for the relationship to tackle in itself. But if my partner were to come in and say, I've decided, like, in fact, my partner has become very supportive in this. She's like, if we're out and she still can drink, but she's never really had a problem, she could go out and sit and have a small glass of wine the whole night, and that's it. She can sit out at a dinner and have a soda, water and lime, not have the need to. And but she said, look, in support of you, when we're out, I don't drink because you're not. Why would I? And I posted a video a day or two ago. We went to one of our favorite restaurants that serves our favorite drink, or which was our favorite drink. And I said to her, listen, have one, no problem at all. And she said, no, we're in this journey together and I'm supporting you, but that's collective growth. She's there as my anchor and as my support, but I'm now getting to a point of my own strength in this, that I don't need to change anyone else's habits. I'm just strong enough in myself and what I'm doing that I know where my path is going. Anyone else can drink, anyone else can not drink, that's not a problem. But, a living example of what happens when a partner or a loved one, someone you're living with, has a different way of thinking to you. How do we address that? Start with some facts, start with a conversation, and ask yourself, are we here, is our collective mindset a fixed one or a growth one?
A friend of mine is going through a very similar journey, and I've been thinking a lot about her journey exactly in that context, right? Because she's been married for many years. They have two beautiful kids together, and the relationship has been great. But eventually there came a point where she realized this isn't working any longer. Not because of something having been significantly wrong, but she just sort of realized there is a point in the relationship where they just grew apart. The priorities and the things that were once important to her, to them, when they were really aligned, have just shifted, and they worked through it. And he was incredibly supportive and tried to really understand her and on her journey and where she wanted to go. But she realized that it just didn't work. So they went through the very difficult decision to separate. And I remember having this conversation with her, and it was, of course, incredibly difficult for both of them. Both of them are good friends of mine. But I remember how very quickly we both recognized the opportunity here, right? Because when you're able to realize that and come to a place of acceptance, you understand that it's not personal. We grow, as you said, we grow on this journey, and eventually we might grow apart. And we either go through challenges and we go on this journey together, but sometimes we just want to drift apart, and it's sad, of course. But I looked at it as an opportunity to clearly communicate with each other on how much love there can still exist, and appreciation and respect for the other person, and understanding and knowing that there's pain, but there's also, there needs to potentially be this opportunity of letting go and focusing on yourself. And I think what they've been able to do now is communicate those things so beautiful, not only with each other, but also with their kids. And I'm just imagining how a few years down the line, where their parents are now obviously dealing with the grief of losing a loved one, and then moving on and maybe meeting someone else, and I'm imagining that they're continuing to be such great communicators, that they have now new relationships where they communicate and love each other so beautifully. And I just imagine how those kids grow up recognizing how their parents communicate beautifully, how they co-parent in amazing ways, and how these kids will be able to love other humans down the line in comparison to children who grow up in relationships where the parents are together for the kids.
Yeah, well, as you were speaking there, I was thinking, you were describing the separation, and the incredibly challenging and the incredibly difficult decision. That puts a weight to it. And I remember when I had a separation many years ago now, but everyone I called up and said, so and so and I, we've broken up. They said, oh man, I'm so sorry to hear that. Are you okay? Is everything okay? 10, 20 people said that. And one person I called up, a lady, a dear friend of mine who's in this coaching space, she said, congratulations. And I was like, what? It's the first one. She said, yeah, congratulations. She said, it takes incredible courage to choose yourself and move out of comfort and ease and stability into something that will serve you better later on. And I was like, oh, wow, congratulations. She congratulated me. It completely changed my mindset into the situation, and also the pain and the suffering that I was supposed to feel after. I was proud of myself. I said, we have chosen ourselves. We've made a decision as two adults to choose ourselves, and that should be celebrated. And again, it comes back to what is our default response to these things? Sadness, commiserations. When someone dies, we mourn and we have grief. But in certain countries, they celebrate. They celebrate, they party, they celebrate the life, And we do have a choice on how we frame that for ourselves.
I couldn't imagine maybe a nicer point to just have that emotion kind of just sit with that, and to maybe end it here. I could have this conversation with you for another 2 hours, and I have plenty of notes left actually to fill that. But I think at this point, what I would love to do is just have you back for another part. There's so much more I want to dive into in terms of creating habits and building this purpose, because that's something that you've been doing so beautifully, and especially your sober 365 journey now. Seeing the approach that you've taken so consistently, something I would love to dive in so much more deeply. But I think at this stage, to kind of maybe get a little bit of an idea of your growth journey, right? And what you've learned along the way. When you think about growth and everything that you've been through and everything that you've been building, what is one message you would leave behind for someone on that journey right now?
Oh, there's a few, but I'll keep it as one. I'll try and keep it as one. Or maybe I'll give you a couple of little nuggets, because these are things that have really resonated for me in the past. And I tell you what, I'll recap the session, some of the things that we covered, because they lend itself here, and then I'll maybe give one final thought. So, be careful of who you keep around you. Be mindful of who you keep around you. We covered that in our session. Yeah. Some of the 5 closest people. Be mindful of how you speak to yourself. We talked about spells and spelling, yeah? And the automatic negative thoughts. And ask yourself every week or every day or after every project, is what I'm doing bringing me joy in any capacity? And if you're answering that as a no at any point, it's time to rethink. I was recently 2 weeks ago, I was in Madrid at the World Meaning and Purpose Summit. And someone put up this slide and it said, all of us will die. And everyone's kind of going, it's a bit of a dramatic end, like everyone's kind of panicking. And then the next slide was, but not all of us will live. And it was like, yeah. How many of us are just on the merry-go-round? You know, and I don't judge people for that. I want people to find happiness and joy in whatever that means to them, right? And sometimes an individual's life purpose or meaning is, I go to the job so that I can earn the money to support a sick relative, and that is my life's purpose. And I'm like, amazing, good. If that's the thing that brings you joy and purpose, pursue it, mind, body, and spirit. So they're the little moments that I want to share back. And the only other little thing that I like to share, I've toyed with this idea of getting this tattoo. I always get asked what tattoo, and Flo, I know you like your tattoo. We've discussed tattoos many times.
I've had one or two, yeah.
Yeah, you got one or two. And there's this quote, it's "this too shall pass" is a quote. And I always used to have that as a bit of a mantra when things were really difficult for me. This too shall pass, yeah? Don't worry, Danny, this will go. This moment will pass and you'll be okay. But then Bryan Cranston from Breaking Bad, he said, this too shall pass. He's like, I love that. But he's like, don't forget that there's a positive on that as well. That when you're at the peak of that mountain, you've just got up Everest, that moment shall pass as well. So to enjoy it, to embrace it, to be grateful for it, because the good shall pass, and so too shall the challenging. So feel it all.
And what a beautiful way to end this. Danny, this has been truly inspirational.
Thanks.
Very happy to have you on.
Likewise. Great to have the conversation with you and to see how much you've grown. And, you know, you're now in Bali. You in Bali at the moment?
Vietnam.
In Vietnam? You were in Bali, right?
That's right.
You were in Bali. Yeah, look at it's a far away from a corporate office in Malta, you know, so you're living your purpose and your passion and your meaning. And so that's very inspiring to see. Not only have you know, always had the stimulating conversations, but you've taken those conversations and put them into action. And look at where you are now, look at what you're doing. And I have no doubt this initiative and project will continue to serve and support. So well done for practicing what you preach.
Thank you, my friend. And I think that will be a little teaser and a spoiler for the next conversation we're going to have, especially around meaning and purpose. Because one thing that I've learned is it's not only fun getting there, right? You're going to reveal a lot of layers of your identity there.
Yeah.
So, completely. Danny, thank you so much. I'm looking forward to having you back.
Likewise, brother. We'll speak soon.
Take care.
Ciao, ciao.